They laughed at her when she walked the flight deck. Too quiet, too young, too invisible to matter. What they didn't know was that Sarah Chen had already been trusted with decisions that never made the news. Decisions measured in lives, not opinions. When a SEAL team became trapped behind enemy air defenses, inside a storm no pilot wanted to enter, the mission came down to one voice in the dark. No applause, no speeches. Just a choice that would either end her career or save everyone. From wherever you're watching, let us know in the comments. And if this story has earned you respect, click like so others can find it too. The salt air hung heavy over Naval Station Norfolk, thick enough to taste. Morning formation had just broken, and the flight deck crew scattered toward their stations, boots clanging against steel grating. Lieutenant Junior Grade Sarah Chen stood at the edge of the tarmac, sea bag slung over one shoulder, orders folder crisp in her other hand. She was 26, 5'4", with her hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. Her uniform was perfect, creases sharp enough to draw blood, not a thread out of place. But none of that mattered to the men watching her arrive. A chief petty officer leaned against a fuel truck, arms crossed, smirk already forming. He nudged the aviation mechanic beside him. "You seeing this?" The mechanic squinted into the morning glare. "What? The new maintenance officer?" "That's not maintenance," the chief said. "And that's our new air operations coordinator." The mechanic's eyebrows shot up. "Her? She looks like she just graduated high school." "Probably did," the chief muttered. "Straight from some desk job at the Pentagon. Never seen a real flight deck in her life." Sarah walked past them without a glance. Her eyes swept the deck with clinical precision, cataloging tie-down points, fuel lines, arresting cables. The chief's voice carried just loud enough. "Hope she doesn't chip a nail out here." Laughter rippled through the group. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she kept walking. She had heard worse. She would hear worse. The hangar bay swallowed her into shadow and diesel fumes. Rows of FA-18 Super Hornets sat in various states of readiness, some with panels open, others gleaming and armed. Maintenance crews moved between them like choreographed chaos. Sarah found the duty officer's station tucked into the corner, a cramped metal desk buried under logbooks and coffee-stained clipboards. A lieutenant commander glanced up, bored. "Chen?" "Yes, sir." "You're late." Sarah checked her watch. She was 3 minutes early. "My order said 0700, sir." "Yeah, well, on this deck, early is on time is late." He shoved a stack of paperwork toward her. "Flight ops start at 0900. You've got 2 hours to familiarize yourself with launch protocols, recovery patterns, and crash procedures. Any questions?" "No, sir." "Good. Try not to get anyone killed." He walked away before she could respond. Sarah set her sea bag down and opened the first logbook. Her eyes moved fast, absorbing data, cross-referencing notes. Around her, the crew worked and watched. A pair of ordnance handlers passed by, one carrying a missile dolly. "Thinks she even knows what a sidewinder is. Probably thinks it's a dance move." More laughter. Sarah didn't look up. She turned a page, her pen moving in small, deliberate strokes. By 0830, she had memorized the deck layout, the radio call signs, and the fuel loads for every aircraft scheduled to launch. She stood, stretched her shoulders once, and walked toward the primary flight control station. The air boss, a grizzled commander with 25 years under his belt, glanced at her like she was a stray seagull. "You, Chen?" "Yes, sir." "You ever worked a live deck before?" "No, sir," he snorted. "Fantastic. Just stay out of the way and don't touch anything. We've got 16 aircraft launching in 30 minutes, and I don't have time to babysit." Sarah nodded and took a position near the observation window. Below, the deck came alive. Yellow-shirted aircraft directors waved planes into position. Red-shirted ordnance crews armed weapons with practiced efficiency. Green-shirted catapult operators checked tension settings. It was controlled chaos, every movement precise, every second counted. And then the first jet fired up. The roar was apocalyptic. Sarah felt it in her chest, her bones, her teeth. The FA-18 rolled forward, nose gear aligning with the catapult shuttle. The pilot gave a crisp salute. The catapult officer dropped to one knee, touched the deck, then pointed forward. The jet launched, 0 to 150 miles per hour in 2 seconds. The sound was violence. Sarah didn't flinch. She watched the angle of the launch, the timing of the steam release, the position of the blast deflector. The air boss noticed. "Something wrong, Lieutenant." "No, sir," Sarah said quietly. Steam pressure was low on Cat 3. The air boss froze. He looked at the gauges, then back at her. "How the hell do you know that?" The delay between the drop signal and launch was 0.8 seconds longer than Cats 1 and 2. Either the shuttle wasn't seated properly, or the accumulator pressure dropped below spec. Silence filled the tower. The senior chief standing beside the air boss stared at her like she'd just spoken in tongues. The air boss keyed his radio. "Cat 3, run a pressure check." A pause. Then a voice crackled back. Sir, we're reading low. Accumulators at 82%. We're cycling it now." The air boss lowered the radio slowly. He looked at Sarah, really looked at her. "You got lucky," he said. But his voice had changed, just slightly. Sarah said nothing. She turned back to the window and watched the next launch. It went perfectly. By the time the last aircraft was airborne, the deck crew had started whispering. Who was she? How did she catch that? The mocking hadn't stopped entirely, but it had grown quieter, more cautious. That night, Sarah sat alone in the junior officer's mess, a tray of lukewarm spaghetti in front of her. Across the room, a table of pilots laughed too loud, throwing insults like grenades. One of them, a lieutenant with a call sign stitched across his flight suit, Viper, looked over at her. "Hey, Chen," he called out. "You ever actually been in a cockpit, or you just good at watching?" His buddies erupted. Sarah took a bite of her spaghetti, chewed slowly, swallowed. Then she looked at him. "I've logged 412 hours in the backseat of an FA-18F, she said evenly. "How many do you have, Viper?" The table went quiet. Viper's smile faltered. "Bullshit." Sarah stood, picked up her tray, and walked toward the exit. As she passed his table, she stopped. "I'll check my jacket if you don't believe me. I was a WSO before I switched to ops." She left. The silence behind her was heavier than the steel bulkheads. Later that night, one of the pilots did check her service record, and when he saw the truth, he didn't say a word. He just closed the file and sat there staring at the wall. Sarah Chen wasn't what they thought, not even close. And soon, the entire carrier would find out exactly who she was. The first sign that something was different came 3 days later. Sarah was in the maintenance bay, reviewing pre-flight checklists with a junior-grade petty officer, when the ship's executive officer walked in. Commander Reese was a man who didn't waste movement or words. He scanned the room, found Sarah, and walked directly to her. "Lieutenant Chen." She straightened. "Yes, sir. You're being reassigned to primary air ops for tomorrow's exercise. The XO wants you in the tower during live fire drills." The maintenance bay went silent. Live fire drills meant real missiles, real targets, real consequences. It was the kind of operation where mistakes got people killed. The petty officer beside Sarah looked at her like she'd just been handed a death sentence. Sarah kept her face neutral. "Understood, sir." Commander Reese studied her for a moment, then nodded and left. The second he was gone, the whispers started. They're setting her up to fail. No way she can handle that kind of pressure. She's going to freeze and then someone's going to die. Sarah ignored them. She spent the rest of the day in the ship's library, a cramped compartment filled with technical manuals and operational doctrines. She pulled every reference on live fire protocols, weapons release parameters, and emergency abort procedures. By midnight, she had committed them to memory. The next morning, she arrived at the tower 30 minutes early. The air boss was already there, coffee in hand, eyes bloodshot. He glanced at her. "You ready for this, Chen?" "Yes, sir." "You sure? Because if you hesitate, if you second guess, if you freeze for even a second, people die. You understand that?" "I do, sir." He studied her face. Whatever he saw there, it satisfied him. "Good. Stay sharp." The exercise began at 0600. 4 FA-18s launched in sequence, climbing into the gray dawn sky. Their mission was simple on paper: engage simulated enemy aircraft over a designated range, fire live missiles, and return to the carrier. But nothing was simple at sea. Sarah stood at her station, headset on, eyes moving between the radar display and the visual feed from the aircraft. The lead pilot's voice crackled over the radio. Viper 1, contact. Bearing 270, Car Angels 12. Copy Viper 1, Sarah replied. You are cleared hot on range. Verify safe separation. Viper 1 confirms safe separation, engaging. The aircraft banked hard, lining up the shot. Sarah watched the radar. The separation between the jet and the target drone was textbook, but something was wrong. The numbers on her screen didn't match the geometry. She keyed her mic. Viper 1, hold fire. Silence. Then, confused. Say again, ops. Hold fire. Your targeting solution is off. You're tracking a ghost return. Negative, ops. I have solid lock. The air boss turned to her, his face hard. Chen, what are you doing? Sarah pointed to the radar display. The altitude delta is incorrect. He's locked onto a reflection off the water surface, not the actual target. If he fires, the missile goes ballistic. The air boss looked at the screen. His jaw tightened. He keyed the command channel. Viper 1, abort. Repeat, abort. Sir, I have... Abort now. The pilot's frustration was audible, but he complied. The missile stayed on the rail. 30 seconds later, the radar updated. The ghost return vanished. The real target appeared 2,000 feet lower. The air boss exhaled slowly. He looked at Sarah. How did you catch that? The sea state was rough. Choppy water creates false radar signatures. I cross-referenced his altitude report with the target's transponder code. They didn't match. The senior chief standing nearby stared at her. That's advanced tracking doctrine. How do you know that? Sarah didn't answer. She just turned back to the display. The rest of the exercise went flawlessly. 4 missiles fired, 4 targets destroyed, 0 incidents. When the aircraft returned to the deck, the pilots climbed out of their cockpits, adrenaline still high. Viper, the lead pilot, pulled off his helmet and looked up at the tower. He didn't wave, he didn't smile, he just nodded once. Slowly. That afternoon, the story spread. The new lieutenant had stopped a missile from going ballistic. She had caught an error that even the pilot missed. She had saved the exercise. By evening, the mocking had stopped. Not entirely, but the edge was gone. The laughter was quieter. The jokes had lost their teeth. Sarah ate dinner alone, as always. But this time, when she left the mess, one of the ordnance handlers stood and opened the door for her. She paused, surprised. He nodded. Ma'am. She nodded back and walked through. It was a small thing, but it mattered. That night, she sat in her berth, a narrow metal rack with barely enough space to turn over. She pulled a folded photograph from her locker. It was old, creased at the edges. A group of people in desert fatigues, faces blurred by dust and time. In the corner, barely visible, was a shoulder patch, a trident, a pair of wings, a scroll. Sarah looked at it for a long time, then tucked it back into the locker and closed the door. The next morning, the ship received an encrypted message. Priority Alpha. Command eyes only. The executive officer read it twice, then walked directly to the captain's quarters. 20 minutes later, the captain called the air boss into his office. The conversation was short. When the air boss left, his face was pale. He found Sarah in the hangar bay, reviewing maintenance logs. Lieutenant Chen. She turned. Sir, you need to come with me. Now. Sarah followed him through the passageways, up 3 decks, into the restricted command section. The captain's office door was open. Inside, the executive officer stood beside the captain's desk, and on the secure video screen, mounted to the bulkhead, a face appeared. Silver hair, 4 stars on each collar, the unmistakable bearing of a man who had commanded fleets. Admiral James Torrance, Commander, Naval Air Forces Atlantic. Sarah's breath caught. Just for a second. The captain gestured to a chair. Sit down, Lieutenant. Sarah sat. The Admiral's voice came through the speakers, calm and precise. Lieutenant Chen, it's been a long time. The room was silent. The air boss stared. The XO stared. Sarah kept her eyes on the screen. Yes, sir, she said quietly. The Admiral leaned forward. I hear you've been doing good work aboard the Lincoln. Just my job, sir. That's not what I'm hearing. I'm hearing you stopped a missile mishap yesterday. Caught a radar ghost that could have turned into a real problem. The system flagged it, sir. I just verified. The Admiral smiled. It was a thin, knowing smile. The system didn't flag anything, Chen. You did, because you've been trained to see what others miss. The captain looked between them, confusion creeping into his expression. Admiral, I don't understand. Captain, the Admiral said. Lieutenant Chen didn't come to you from a desk job. She came from Naval Special Warfare Development Group. She spent 18 months embedded with SEAL Team 6 as a tactical air controller. She's the reason Operation Silent Anchor succeeded in Yemen. She coordinated air support for a hostage rescue under enemy fire in zero visibility mosh with jamming on every frequency. She brought every aircraft home, every SEAL home, and she did it without a single casualty. The room went dead silent. The air boss's mouth opened. No sound came out. The Admiral continued. She requested transfer to conventional operations because she wanted to serve without the classification restrictions. I approved it personally, but I also told her that if she ever needed anything, she could call me directly. He looked at Sarah through the screen. I'm calling you, Lieutenant. There's a situation developing in the Eastern Mediterranean. High-value target. Time-sensitive. Complex air coordination required. I need someone I trust. Sarah's hands tightened on the armrests. Sir, I'm assigned to... I've already cleared it with your CO. You'll be detached to the task force within 6 hours. A helo is en route to pick you up. The captain found his voice. Admiral, with respect, Lieutenant Chen has only been aboard for a week. My crew barely knows her. The Admiral's expression didn't change. Captain, your crew is about to learn exactly who she is. And when this is over, they'll understand why I trust her with missions that can't afford failure. He looked at Sarah again. Pack your gear, Lieutenant. You're going back to work. The helicopter lifted off the deck at 1400 hours. Sarah sat in the troop compartment, helmet on, sea bag strapped beside her. Through the open door, she watched the USS Abraham Lincoln shrink into the gray Atlantic. On the flight deck below, the crew had gathered. Not in formation, just standing there, watching. The air boss stood at the edge of the deck, arms crossed. Beside him, the executive officer. Behind them, the maintenance crews, the ordnance handlers, the pilots. Even Viper was there, his flight suit unzipped, helmet under one arm. None of them waved, none of them saluted. They just watched her leave. And in that silence, something shifted. The helicopter banked east and disappeared into the clouds. Sarah closed her eyes and let the roar of the rotors wash over her. She had 6 hours before she'd be inserted into a situation she couldn't discuss, coordinating assets she couldn't name, for a mission that would never appear in any official record. But that wasn't what filled her mind. What filled her mind was the memory of the chief petty officer by the fuel truck, the one who had smirked and said she looked like she'd just graduated high school, the one who had laughed when someone joked about her chipping a nail. She wondered if he was standing on that deck right now. She wondered if he understood. The task force briefing took place aboard the USS Gettysburg, a guided missile cruiser operating in international waters off the coast of Syria. Sarah entered the operations center and found herself surrounded by personnel she recognized immediately. A SEAL team commander with a beard and a 1,000-yard stare. An Air Force combat controller with a laptop covered in operation stickers. A CIA liaison whose name badge was conspicuously blank. And at the head of the table, Admiral Torrance, transmitted via secure video link. He didn't waste time. We have a window of 4 hours. High-value target is moving through a valley network outside Latakia. Ground team is already in position, but they need air cover. The problem is the airspace. Russian S-400 batteries to the north. Syrian air defense to the south. Commercial traffic overhead. And a thunderstorm rolling in from the west. He looked directly at Sarah through the screen. I need you to thread the needle, Lieutenant. Get our aircraft in, keep them invisible, and bring everyone home. Sarah studied the digital map projected on the wall. Terrain elevations, threat radii, flight paths, weather patterns. It was a puzzle with too many pieces and not enough space. She pulled a stylus from her pocket and began drawing on the touchscreen. We can't go high. The S-400 coverage is too dense. We can't go low through the valley. Syrian mobile units will hear the engines. The SEAL commander leaned forward. So what do we do? Sarah traced a line along the map. We go through the storm. The room went quiet. The Air Force controller frowned. That's a Category 3 system. Visibility will be 0. Turbulence will throw off targeting solutions. I know, Sarah said, but the storm masks our radar signature. If we time it right, we enter the cell at the western edge, ride the precipitation corridor through the threat zone, and exit on the far side before the Syrians even know we were there. The CIA liaison shook his head. That's insane. You're asking pilots to fly combat maneuvers in conditions where they can't see their own wingtips. Sarah turned to him. I'm asking them to trust me. I'll guide them through. Every meter, every second. I've done it before. The Admiral's voice cut through. She has, and it worked. The SEAL commander looked at Sarah for a long moment. Then he nodded. Do it. The operation launched at 2200 hours. 2 FA-18 Super Hornets, call signs Reaper 1 and Reaper 2, lifted off from the carrier and climbed into the darkness. Sarah sat in the operations center, headset on, 3 screens in front of her displaying radar, weather data, and real-time satellite imagery. The storm was a monster. Lightning flickered inside the cloud mass like a living thing. The lead pilot's voice crackled over the radio. Reaper 1 approaching the cell, visibility dropping fast. Sarah keyed her mic. Copy Reaper 1, reduce speed to 300 knots, descend to Angels 8. Follow my heading. Roger. Descending. The aircraft entered the storm. Turbulence hit immediately. Sarah watched the radar track bounce and shudder. Reaper 1, steady on heading 092. You're drifting south. Correct 2 degrees port. Correcting. Good, hold that line. Reaper 2, tighten your spacing. You're falling behind. Reaper 2, adjusting. The minutes crawled. Inside the storm, the world disappeared. No horizon, no sky. Just rain and wind and the constant threat of collision. Sarah's eyes moved between the screens, calculating distances, adjusting vectors, compensating for wind shear. Reaper 1, threat radar active, bearing 045, Syrian mobile unit just lit you up. I see it. Should I break off? Negative. Hold your course. The storm is masking your return. They can't get a lock. Silence. Then, tense. You sure about that, Ops? Sarah's voice didn't waver. I'm sure. Trust me. The seconds stretched. The Syrian radar swept again, and then it went dark. Reaper 1, threat radar is down. They lost you. A breath of relief came through the radio. Copy. Proceeding. Sarah guided them through the heart of the storm. Every instruction precise, every correction measured. She could feel the weight of it, the lives in her hands, the mission balanced on the edge of failure. And then, finally, the lead pilot's voice came through, steadier now. Reaper 1, breaking through. I have visual on the target zone. Copy. Reaper 1, you are cleared to engage. The weapons release was perfect. 2 precision-guided munitions, both on target. The ground team radioed confirmation. Objective complete. Sarah exhaled slowly. Reaper 1, Reaper 2, RTB, follow heading 270. Exit through the southern corridor. Roger. Heading 270. The aircraft climbed out of the storm and into clear night sky. 30 minutes later, they were back aboard the carrier. 0 casualties, 0 compromises. Mission success. The operations center erupted in quiet celebration. The SEAL commander stood and extended his hand to Sarah. She shook it. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The Admiral's voice came through the speakers one last time. Outstanding work, Lieutenant. I'll see you when you get back. The screen went dark. Sarah pulled off her headset and stood. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was calm. But inside, something had settled. Something she hadn't felt in a long time. When she returned to the USS Abraham Lincoln 2 days later, the ship was different. Or maybe she was. The crew still worked. The deck still roared with jet engines. The routine hadn't changed, but the way people looked at her had. The chief petty officer by the fuel truck saw her walk past. He straightened, nodded once. She nodded back. In the hangar bay, the maintenance crews stepped aside to let her through, not out of fear, out of respect. Viper found her in the officer's mess that evening. He sat down across from her without asking. "I heard what you did," he said quietly. Sarah looked up from her tray. "I just did my job." "No," Viper said. "You saved lives. You always do." He stood, gave her a small nod, and walked away. That night, Sarah sat in her berth and pulled out the photograph again. The faces blurred by dust, the trident patch barely visible. She didn't need to look at it anymore. She knew who she was, and now, so did they. The next morning, she reported to the tower for regular operations. The air boss handed her a cup of coffee without a word. She took it. Outside, the sun rose over the Atlantic, painting the deck in gold and shadow. Aircraft launched into the dawn, one after another, their engines screaming defiance at the sky. And Sarah Chen stood at her station, quiet and steady, watching over them all. Because that was who she had always been. Not loud, not flashy, not demanding recognition, just competent, disciplined, lethal when it mattered, a guardian in silence. And the world had finally learned to listen. Weeks later, a letter arrived in the ship's mail call. It was addressed to Lieutenant Sarah Chen. The return address was unmarked, but the postmark was from Virginia Beach. Inside was a single sheet of paper, no signature, just 4 words, written in clean, precise handwriting. "The butterfly still flies." Sarah read it twice. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in her locker beside the photograph. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. Some things didn't require words. Some things were understood in silence. And as the USS Abraham Lincoln cut through the waves toward the next mission, Sarah Chen stood on the deck and watched the horizon. The wind pulled at her uniform. The salt air filled her lungs. And for the first time in a long time, she felt seen. Not because she had demanded it, not because she had fought for it, but because she had earned it. One decision at a time. One mission at a time. One life saved at a time. The mocking had ended. The doubt had faded. And in its place and something far more valuable had taken root. Respect, dignity, recognition, not loud, not public, but real. And that was all she had ever wanted. The destroyer passed into the distance and its wake trailing behind like a promise. And Sarah Chen, the invisible professional, stood her ground. Silent, steady, unbroken.